All right, good morning, everyone. Appreciate you being here today to enjoy the 15th Forest Owners Winter School. And generally, we reserve an entire large building like a community college that has multiple classrooms, and we'll pack 200 or 300 people in there and to learn a variety of different topics and to also interact one-on-one with exhibitors, and some people will demonstrate. We typically have a sawmill, which is what we're going to talk about in just a minute, and they're a great way to meet other landowners and get united with the services and the products that can help you move your ideas forward to achievement. So to introduce myself real briefly, my name is Andy Perleyberg. I'm one of the coordinators of this event. I'm the state extension forester, and this morning we are going to be discussing portable sawmills, and I've asked a few people that have sawmills to give some advice on things that you ought to know about sawmills. So I see we have almost 30.
Recording in progress, so we would see your question, and then
everybody, please mute your.
Everyone see the question and everyone see the answer. So go ahead and change that if you haven't already.
And or I'll mute you
for just so that you know. So we're recording these presentations, and they're going to be available online the next couple of days after we get them sorted.
Who is this? Okay. Mute Patty. Okay, please mute yourself, and we're going to go ahead and get started. The three presenters today are Eric McVeigh. I'll let them introduce themselves. Eric McVeigh, Michael Weller, and Dave Collins is here with me, sitting to my right. And so Eric put together a quick video. We'll watch that, and then we'll we'll have discussion, and hopefully we'll have half of the program will be left up for Q&A. So here's your shot, but I encourage you to follow up with any of these guys in the future with other questions, and you can also contact me, and I can help you triage your questions and get the answers that you need. So here we go with the video. Share.
There he goes.
The problem is up there. Mobile milling or portable milling, sometimes called transient milling, is a great option for homeowners or landowners that have trees that they'd like to get turned into lumber instead of just burning them in firewood. And the operation is pretty straightforward. You got a log deck, and you take the logs and you roll to the mill, and most of the modern portable sawmills you see running around have hydraulics. So as you watch this video, you'll notice that the mill's going to lift those big logs up onto the log deck, and in a mill like mine, the Wood-Mizer LT40 hydraulic has hydraulic log loaders, has a hydraulic clamp, hydraulic side supports and toe boards, and all kinds of things to lift and move and clamp and support the log when it's on the mill deck. The mill can load a 4,400 pound log by itself. I've actually loaded heavier with the use of a tractor to help lift the log. And one of the things you always want to try to do is keep the logs coming, keep them coming to the sawmill. So you want to have that log deck fairly close to the mill so that you can roll logs to the mill and have them ready and staged so the sawyer can get to work and start providing lumber for you. And these sawmills can produce any dimension lumber that you need. If you need beams, we can make them. If you need 2x6s, 2x8s, 2x12s, 1x, ½ inch, it doesn't matter. These mills are programmable. Some the manual mills, you have to do it by hand, but on a mill like the Wood-Mizer L240, you've got computerized set works that will adjust the cut to the right height. So you see here, I'm actually making 3 2x6s at once. And these are dimensional plus an eighth, so they've got a little room to shrink. So they'll be dimensional 2x6 by the time they're done. That'd be 1.5 inches by 5.5 inches. And I can mill 3 of those at a time. No problem on this mill, and with a good crew pulling boards off as we go, you can really produce on one of these mills. It's surprising just how much lumber you can produce in a short period of time. Normally with a portable sawmill operation, the landowner is the laborer, or they provide the labor. So an operation like mine, or a lot of portable sawmill operations that you'll find, you get the sawyer and the sawmill itself and all the tools and equipment and knowledge that come with it, and then you provide the labor, and that could be day labor that you hire, or just guys that in the family, we got 15 sons, or it can be just family members, it can be anybody. So it works for the homeowner, the landowner. That works for us. As long as you've got someone that can pull that lumber off the mill. If you have the sawyer do it, then you're really not getting the best bang for your buck. But if you're providing the logs, you can see your lumber prices down around 35 cents a board foot. Now, some sawyers charge by the board foot, some like me charge by the hour, but in the end it works out that you're really getting lumber in that 35 cents to 50 cents a board foot, maybe 25 cents. It all depends on the operation, depends on the quality of the logs, quality of the laborers that are helping out, the environment. But I would tell you, if you're looking to hire a mobile sawmill like us to come out and work for you, the best things you can do is make sure you anchor seal the ends of the logs, make sure you have the logs decked up, usually no more than 2 high in a log deck. Have them in a place that the mill can be pulled in right in front of the logs, so that it's easy to roll from the log deck to the mill, and have room for the lumber that's coming off the mill. You're going to have a slab pile, probably have a flitch pile, which is a board with wane on either side, and then you'll have your lumber pile. And as long as you lay out an area where a guy with a truck or a truck and camper can come in and pull that sawmill in and set it up for you, then I think you're going to find that having a portable sawyer come out is going to save you a lot of money on lumber costs. And this lumber can be graded and stamped if necessary. Some sawyers do that themselves. I myself actually provide a number for a grader that you can have come out. I prefer to do it that way because I'm going to mill the best possible lumber I can for you, but I'm not going to tell you that it's a number 1 and you find out it's not, it's a number 2 or something like that. I'll have a grader come out and grade my work, and I think that's better for the homeowner or the landowner. In any case, thanks for watching. Hopefully this answers some questions for you, and if you have any questions, we're here to answer them. Thanks.
So there you go. Appreciate that, making that video for us, Eric.
You bet, Andy. My pleasure.
All righty. I think we're back to the main screen where we can see everybody. Appreciate that, Eric. And our next speaker is Michael Weller. Michael's out of North Idaho and works all over the Intermountain area. So Michael.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks, Eric, for that video. I forgot to say like, subscribe, and share at the end of that thing, but I'm sure it's going to take off good. I thought that was a great way to kind of start this off. All of us have kind of started at some point. I've been milling now 20 years, and I started out with a chainsaw mill. I couldn't find lumber that I needed for a furniture business, and didn't have any property at the time, and I was able to work a little deal with the Forest Service, and as long as they weren't over 8 foot, I made a bunch of boards. Hard work. You work all day long on one single tree compared to with the wood miser, I can do the same amount in about 5 minutes. So it's come a long way. But it was kind of, the portable sawmills is a very large array of different topics we can talk about. So I want to make sure when you do the questions, feel free to ask anything from, should you own one? Should you just hire somebody to come in once in a while? The other things that we need to probably talk about are the extra costs of owning a sawmill. Blades, maintenance, fuel, support equipment, how do you get the logs to make that nice pile for whoever's coming, different board sawing rates that we can go through with a single operator to one extra person to 2 extra people. So it's kind of open for the gamut. I don't want to take up too much time, but I did want to mention a few things.
2.5 acres. So she's
I first met Eric on Forestry Forum. It's forestryforum.com. It's .org, Eric.
looking at
.com.
a little bit
.com. So that is a wealth of knowledge for anybody to that has any sort of questions about sawmills, sawmilling operations, the different types of sawmills. I think Eric asked so many questions on there that I never had to ask one. I just had to kind of look through what he was experiencing as we were kind of growing through the business, starting up on it together. YouTube is kind of the new place to find things if you're visual. You got Old Jarhead, Eric's channel, to every Southern Indiana sawmill, to American Dream. There's a plethora of different guys, and then the last one is Facebook. There's a group for every type.
You got muted there, Michael.
Well, that was amazing. How much did we miss? Did we? I was talking about Facebook groups as another way to find some more information. Any group that you want to, or mill that you want to search, I'm sure there's a group on Facebook. But kind of enough about me. I work out of North Idaho. I used to do a bunch of mobile milling, but in the current market, I'm lucky enough to have land, and I'm kind of transitioning into a custom order where people can either bring me logs, they harvest themselves, so I can cut them on my site, or people without logs, I procure the logs and give them custom orders. But without further ado, who's next up? Is we going to Dave or Eric?
Yeah, Eric, maybe you follow up.
Sure. Okay. Well, Michael's right. Forestryforum.com. I'm a prolific questioner, and I'll tell you there's no dumb question, and I'm always available to answer questions. You saw I do the YouTube stuff. So if you get on my YouTube channel and you have a question, don't be shy. I will answer it. And honestly, Andy's format, these forest and range owner field days are awesome. So I encourage everybody when there is warmer weather and we're out there demonstrating, come on out and see what we can do. So like Michael, I've been doing it a while. I also started out on a chainsaw mill. That's a common theme in this industry. I started out on a chainsaw mill, and then I had a small bandsaw on the ground, and then I put it on a trailer, and that's what you see behind me is actually the 2013 Forest and Range Owners Field Day set up in Havila. So Andy and I, we've kind of known each other for a little while, but I am 100% mobile. So unlike Michael, I do not mill at my own location for others. I am strictly mobile, and I'll travel 200 miles. In fact, I had a customer looking to have me come out. It's 250 miles away, and I'm happy to do it. Obviously, he's got to pay the mileage, but the cost savings is phenomenal. I have done milling jobs. I did 40,000 board feet in a lot for a gentleman, and I saved him over $20,000. So yes, it can be cost effective to buy a mill, but it can also be very cost effective to hire a portable sawyer. And I would encourage you either way. So if you have questions, and you're looking to buy one, don't be shy. I can guarantee you that myself and Michael and others would be happy to show you and help you make those choices. So ask away. We're here to answer.
David.
Dave, did you have anything you want to add?
Sure. My name is Dave Cons. Our business is called Double D Wood Products. We're up in Republic, Washington. And I have a 2015 Timber King 2000. And so it's a pretty nice machine. I love it. The history behind that is a buddy of mine was wanting to get one. He bought it and he cut what he needed, and he says, Dave, you have a barn. Can we store it in your barn there? I said, no problem. So whenever he needs something, or but I supply him with I also have a Blockbuster firewood processor and a Hacky Pilkey firewood processor. So lumber and firewood is our main business, and then along with these, we do 10 to 15,000 campwood bundles a year too. So, I supply a lot of small orders, but I'm getting more and more bigger orders. My mill is stationary. It can be mobile, but I have it's a 20-foot deck with a 12-foot extension. So it's 30 foot, and it takes half a day to just tear it down. So it stays in the barn put together. I have had, compared to Eric, I have probably had maybe 10 people over the years bring me logs. And out of those 10 people, the first question I ask is, where did you cut this log? Where did it come from? And if they say, oh, it was right next to my house or right along the roadway, I pretty much will say, I'm sorry, I'm just not gonna. There almost all the time there's some sort of metal in there. And when you hit metal with a sawmill, it's exciting, put it that way. So but some of the things that I just to throw out there, if people thinking about getting a mill, is where does your supply come from? Where do you get your logs? The other thing is how do you put them on the mill? And I think like Eric in his video said, if you're doing this by yourself, it's a lot of work, and it's nice to have somebody pulling that lumber off for you. So Yeah, like I said, we're of a republic. I welcome anybody to stop by. I look for any reason. I love milling and so, I love to show people. So if you're interested in getting one, feel free to give me a call and, come out for a visit. So.
So Andy, I see a lot of questions in the chat, and I've answered a few of the easier ones that maybe typing the answer would work really well. But I do see some that I'd like to take a crack at answers. So one of them was, anyone just run a metal detector over the logs? Yes, absolutely. And I encourage all of my potential customers to do just that. Portable sawyers, even stationary sawyers, typically charge a fee for damaged bands if you run into metal. So always a good idea to look for metal. There's another answer. How common is it for these portable mills to cut lumber with a wavy pattern? I had a sawyer do it with waves in the middle and also at the start of the cut. So a properly set up bandsaw mill should not cut wavy patterns. That isn't to say that if something has extremely hard knots, that you might not get a lift or a dive on a knot, but a good sawyer with experience can go back and look at that, shave that off, and go back to cutting flat. So I would say in general that should not happen, but with an inexperienced sawyer or an improperly set up mill, that's always a possibility. So I would just advise that if you're looking to hire a mobile sawyer, probably a good idea to ask those kind of questions, see what their answers are, and just kind of feel them out for their experience level. I will tell you that I think Michael and I have been probably milling about the same length of time, and I haven't met David, but I have seen you on Andy's website for years now. So it sounds like, we probably all got similar experience there. Let's see, good choices for, what are some good choices for small forest owners to do a few logs a year? Well, I would advise, if you're doing some work thinning out your forest for beetle and fire protection, and I'm not really sure what the question is in terms of good choices, but I would tell you that most mobile sawyers like myself have a minimum. So if I have to travel 100 miles or more, then I need a minimum of 8 hours worth of work. And if you're felling 10-inch logs, well, I could do 3 or 4 of those an hour without much trouble. And I'm sure Michael and David would be in the same scenario. Your small logs go fast, so you want to have a lot of them. You don't want to have like just 2 or 3 logs and have a mobile sawyer come out, because it's not cost effective, not unless they're big logs.
I'll have to agree with pretty much everybody has a minimum just to cover the cost of transportation and breakdown setup and everything else. Even the least expensive mills right now, I still see some guys running some Harbor Freights that are running $3,000-$4,000. It's in the long run, I'm going to say even the cheapest bandsaw mill is going to last you longer than a chainsaw mill. I burned up 2 chainsaw mills, and they run, a good power head's going to run you $1,500. So it's kind of one of those things. You're not going to get the hydraulics with it and stuff like that. But if you just wanted to do a few a year, there's some local Sequoia mills. I believe they're up near Republic in the area. They build a small sawmill, going to run you around $5,000-$6,000. Lynn Lumber Machines out of I think it's Sweet Home, Oregon. You can either build your own mill through their parts or buy one of the pre-assembles, and they're going to run you about $8,000 for a manual bandsaw mill. And then I'd say used market used to always be a good place, but right now sawmills everybody's wanting to get into it, and they're a hot commodity.
Yeah, good catch there, Michael. I was totally going off on a different track. So
no,
great.
well, two ways to look at it. The best thing is still, if you can get up enough, you got to make that determination of whether or not you want to spend the $8,000 to $10,000 for 5 to 6 logs a year, or just save up and hire somebody to come in. There's that cost break point for you.
Yep, exactly. So I will tell you that that's actually how I ended up with a band sawmill. As mentioned before, I started on a chainsaw, but I picked up a Wood-Mizer LT10 on the ground, the bottom of the line Wood-Mizer. At the time, it was $3,500 with 10 bands. And I did that because it cost me less to do that than to buy the knotty pine to finish the inside of my cabin. And unfortunately, it morphed eventually into me having a fully hydraulic sawmill. But so you can absolutely do that. Now, I don't know what the LT10s run today. And to wrap that into another question, there was a question comparing Wood-Mizer to Lucas. And I will tell you that it's kind of like the Ford and Chevy and Dodge, right? Wood-Mizer, Timber King, Woodland Mills, Lucas, they're all good mills. So I would not tell you that any isn't as good as a Wood-Mizer. I'm a Wood-Mizer fan. They have great support, but I've heard from all the bigger names, the high quality mills, they've all got good support. They've got good groups of people that work with them. And I think David would agree probably with his Timber King. They're all good mills. So it's a matter of, what your preference is, I think.
And I guess I can add, for a while there, I went all in. I had a Lynn lumber machine out of Sweet Home, Oregon, stationary mill. I had a Lucas swing blade mill. And then I bought my Wood-Mizer LT40 all at once. I realized quickly that I could only run one at a time. So the Lucas mills was great for being able to be portable. I could bring it out. I could set it up right over the top of a log and off and running and cutting. But the drawback was it was very difficult to cut boards. So anything less than 1.5 inches, you were eating up a 1/4 inch saw curve, and it was fast. You cut down and back and you had a board. So they were really good for processing 2x4s, 2x6s. My mill was only a 14-inch wheel, so I could really only cut about 6 inches deep, but it would definitely produce a lot of lumber in a hurry. The bad thing was every time you finished with the log, you had to break it down and move a log in, or it was very difficult to move the log in underneath the setup you already had. There was a lot of waste at the end because you didn't want to cut into the ground, whereas the Wood-Mizer, I can cut down my last cuts at, excuse me, last cuts down at 3/4 of an inch, so you maximize the entire log. So it really depends on what kind of logs if you've got really big logs and you want a lot of 2x4s, 2x6s, swing blades will get them done in a hurry. The customer support for Wood-Mizer won out with the people in Portland and over in eastern Montana. They're on the phone right away. Lucas Mills, the support was out of Bailey's, out of California, and it would take you a while to get some answers if you ever had any questions on how to run that.
So I saw a really good question here. It says, do you mill hardwoods, ? And how long from the time you fell the log to milling? So 2 questions. I'll answer the first. We can mill any kind of wood. So anything, virtually, doesn't matter. So yes, I have milled everything from ponderosa pine to black locust, black walnut, red oak, maple, you name it. As far as the how long, I have a little joke that I like to tell my potential customers, which is, if I could fell the tree right on the mill, that would be ideal. The only other better option would be to stand the mill right up on the tree. So in other words, we want those logs as green and dripping wet as possible to go on to the sawmill. And there's a few reasons for that, but the quickest answer as to why is the wet logs mill faster, the band lasts longer, and when you stack and sticker properly, they will dry much better. With anchor sealed on the ends, they're going to dry more evenly. You're going to get less movement, all that kind of stuff. So the sooner the better. The longer the log stays on the ground, the more chance you're going to get end checking, which is cracking on the ends, rot, beetle damage, and it can also dry out. And once you start milling logs that are really dry, then you're going to be milling slower. It's going to take longer, and you're not going to get as good a product. So sooner the better, absolutely. Here's a question. I don't know if David or Michael want to answer this one. I'm happy to, but it's how much attention do you pay to the grain when milling for siding, flooring, dimensional lumber? Are there good resources to learn these patterns and techniques to reduce warping, checking, and cracking?
That's a great question. It kind of ties into your last one with milling the trees as green as you can get them. The majority of it is going to come down to, once it's cut, getting that properly stacked and stickered for air drying with as much weight as you can get on it. But if we want to get a little more detailed, for milling, for siding, I haven't had a big problem with trying to match siding. So batten-board siding, things like that, I pretty much just cut top to bottom. Flooring is where you're going to get into a little more specialized stuff. They say that the hardwood flooring processors say only about a third or less of the wood that they cut actually makes it to final flooring because of the amount of warpage or shrinkage. So you really got to pay attention to the grain. Vertical grain is going to shrink less in the horizontal plane than the vertical plane because of the way the grain shrinks in it. So that would be your top of the line quality stuff. So it can be milled any way you want. The quarter sawn is going to take much longer. You're going to have a lot more waste. Looking for that vertical grain. And once again, the best resource I have to pass on again would be that Forester Forum, because people are asking, they have specialized things in wood drying, and the experts are in there all the time for asking any question you may have.
I want to break in and go to kind of the top of the chat box right here. It's a little bit different question and has to do with the permitting process. Not exactly sawmill, but we have Phil Hess as a consulting forester and represents landowners on the small forest landowner office board. So Phil, maybe you can lean in and answer the question: how do timber harvest FPA regulations affect personal sawmill use and on-site use of the timber? If I want to take a few trees and process on site, do I need an FPA? Or is that just for a commercial harvest?
Well, this is an excellent question. As you may or may not know, the forest practice regulations allow an exemption from the permit if you're using or harvesting and using 5,000 board feet per year for personal use. And I will preface my answer with the comment that the personal use exemption can be interpreted in different ways. So it kind of depends on the DNR DNR region you're in, but the answer is yes, it will qualify for the exemption, in my opinion. I don't think there's any question about that. It becomes non-personal use when the logs are put on a truck and hauled out. That usually does not qualify for personal use, even if it's hauled out as firewood. But this situation where you're milling it on the property certainly qualifies for the 5,000 board feet, by the way, is per year annually. And that's roughly a truckload of logs for just ease of figuring. So the answer is yes, it will qualify for the exemption.
Thanks, Phil.
Good answer. Oh, sorry. I wanted to jump back real quick on the last question. How much attention do you pay to the grain when milling for siding, flooring, dimensional lumber? I will tell you that the grain is not my first concern when milling any kind of lumber, but rather the stress. So your sawyer is really going to be looking at the stress in the log or the sweep of the log, because it's very important when milling lumber for someone to know what they want to do with it. If you're going to make, for example, studs, then you do not want crowns in your studs. You want them to face bend. So they need to make sure that when they mill, that stress is going to be on the flat side of the stud, not on the narrow side. If you're milling paneling or siding, same thing. You don't want to have a crown on them. Versus if you're having someone come out to mill floor joists or rafters, you don't want face bends on those, you want crowns. Everyone's heard of crown up when you're framing rafters or floor joists. So that's the first concern of the sawyer, is looking at that stress, how much stress is in the log, and what to do with that stress and where to leave it. Because there's always movement. Wood moves, it's natural. It doesn't do what we want it to do. It does what it wants to do, and you learn to work with it. But that's the first thing. As far as grain itself, that's something that is a little more, let's say we're milling some black walnut, and you're looking for specific, maybe you're making gun stocks or something else, then yeah, we may take more time to really look at the grain patterns and see where we can take the lumber out of that log to give you the best possible product that you want. But it's really more of a more specialized. Whereas flooring, like Michael said, typically if you're doing anything that's going to be flat, like a siding or something like that, paneling, that kind of thing, you're going to straight mill that log right down, because you're going to get that flat sawn pattern, which is actually what people like. Versus when you mentioned quarter sawing, that's where you're trying to make lumber that is going to have the least shrinkage. It's going to be very, very strong because the grains are all standing up, and that's a different process. But typically that's only done with hardwoods, like red oak or something that you're milling for flooring or tables or something like that. You might do that. So hopefully that answered your question. The question on anchor seal, I answered that in the chat, that it's just a product you buy. You want to paint that on the end of your logs as quickly as you can. That stops the ends from drying. And one of the misconceptions about lumber and logs is people think the log needs to dry because then the lumber will be dry. And it's really kind of the opposite of that. If the log starts to dry and the ends aren't sealed, the ends shrink. And when they shrink, that causes them to pull apart from the center of the log, which is still wet. And so it's kind of the opposite of what you think. But as that end of the log tries to shrink, the center of the log is not going to let it get narrower, so it pulls apart. And that's what causes the cracking. We call that checking or end checks. And that's why you seal those. And if you do it as a log, it will prevent that end checking, so that later, once it's milled, that sealant is still there. It will prevent the ends from the lumber from drying too fast. And the stacking and stickering allows air movement to get through the bundle. And this is another important thing for you to understand about drying, is that it's not really the heat that dries lumber, it's air movement. You need air to keep moving through that stack of lumber, because it carries the moisture away from the stack. So hopefully that helps answer that question for you.
Can you guys comment on milling burned wood?
Oh, I would love to. I don't know about my peers, and I should let them talk, but I have to tell you, we have a gal here from the DNR. I don't know if you know Sonia Schaller up in Riverside, but she had a bunch of logs burned in the Okanagan during the fire of 2015, I believe, or 2016, around that time frame. And they felled those, got them decked up, and I came out, and they were told by many people that those burned logs were no good. I milled up several thousand board feet of lumber for her. I think maybe something like 20,000 board feet. It was a lot. And they built an absolutely gorgeous barn for their sheep out of that lumber. Beams, posts, you name it, everything was done on the sawmill. So burn logs, the only thing I will tell you, you need to get them quick. If they stand up a couple summers, the black bark causes them to drive very, very fast. And so they begin to check and crack too quickly. They may only be good for beams if they've been standing 3 or 4 years after they burn. So it's important to get them as quick as possible.
Thanks, Eric.
Just a comment too, when you're on your logs, you want the cleanest logs you can possibly get, because you hit one little tiny pebble and your blade is done for. So it's very important to somehow keep your logs clean, pressure wash them, peel the bark if need be, but just little input on that. One little rock will ruin your whole blade.
So this is where the Timber King, the twin rail guys, etc., will differ from the Wood Miser owners, because actually I tell my customers, don't worry, drag them out of the woods and I'll put it on the mill, because I have something called the debarker. Michael probably also does. And the debarker cuts a groove right in front of the log. So I literally, when you're pulling a mill into a mobile location, 20 miles from the nearest town up in the mountains with no power around, I just want to make sure everybody knows a lot of operations. Yes, there's nothing wrong with cleaning your logs. It's good, but I'm not going to tell you to do that, because I've got the debarker. I'm going to cut that groove in and clean everything out. And I don't have an issue with logs pulled in the mud, but it is a good idea.
I just wanted to jump in here real quick. We kind of tie into the drying. Years ago, I found a report done by the U.S. Forest Service for our region, Eastern Washington, North Idaho, that gave drying times for a 2x6. They did Douglas fir, and June, July, and August, a properly stacked bunch of 2x6s will dry from fresh cut timber, which is generally 40 to 60% moisture, down to 12% in 15 days, which always kind of amazes everybody. You start looking online and reading everything. West side of the mountains, where you got higher humidities, and down south, everybody's always talking have to dry for a year, have to dry a year per inch of cut, whereas we live in an area where it just dries. And so it ties back into end sealing. Anchor seal is great. I don't use it as much because I'm cutting logs so fast. I do go in during that higher temperature time of year and run down to the garbage dump, and they normally every Thursday in my area they have paint turn in, and I will at least coat them with a coat of latex paint. It's not as good as the waxed end sealer of Anchor Seal, but it's a whole lot cheaper. I still encourage people to cut their logs at least 6 inches over to help with the end check as well. And stickering, the closer you can get the outside stickers to the end of the boards, it's kind of helps stop that end checking as it's moving in.
Can you explain stickering?
Stickering. So stickers are the boards that we put in between each layer. I generally, for ease, I do them in 4-foot wide stacks, and and we can cut up normally the outside boards as we're cutting along. We can cut into stickers, charging by the hour. It just kind of works into your hourly rate. But the people, sawyers always talk about, I cut a beautiful stack of lumber, and they stacked it all out, and they go back a year later and they're still stacked on top of each other. And the not allowing that to dry once it's been cut will encourage mold and insects and everything else. The faster you can get that lumber dried, the more resistant it's going to become to those things. So I generally cut my stickers. I cut them 3/4 by an inch. Some people do 2 inch wide, and I put them about every 2 to 3.
Any one of these volume controls.
So The higher you can stack, the more weight you have to keep your stacks flat as well as they're drying.
But I would add to that. I've actually seen ponderosa pine dry in 8 weeks to a level low enough to make use of it. So the Okanagan in particular is very good. Now I will tell you that I don't like milling in August. Excessive heat without good air movement actually is really not a good equation for drying lumber. So I tend to try to shy away from that. But if I am milling in that kind of temperatures, I always encourage my customers to do a few things. One, don't put the lumber inside. Often they want to put it in a garage or a barn that's sealed up tight. I generally advise them not to do that because there's no air movement. Now, if you have a drying building that has lots of air movement through it, that's fine, but you really want air movement. So what I encourage them to do is do their stacking and stickering so that outside and in some partial shade. Partial shade is good. Near a stream or pond is actually not bad because you don't want the moisture to get sucked out. Like in the Tri-Cities, you dry something in August in the Tri-Cities and it's not going to go well. Not unless you can have a way to control it. North side of a building, out of the sun, that kind of thing. But covering the top of the stack with roofing material or something like that is best. Don't cover the sides or ends and put as much weight as you can on it. And honestly, I have dried thousands upon thousands of board feet of lumber that way. And it's all done very well. And I've done that with softwoods as well as hardwoods. So
we're gonna wrap up now with the final question because the class is over in about 3 minutes. And this last question is, it appears to me that it's probably got a lot of opinions. Does portable milled lumber need additional work before use, like planing and sealants? So I'm curious what you guys have to say about that. But before you finish, I want to thank you all as being part of this panel. This is fantastic information. I have the transcripts if anybody wants to review some of the responses that Eric has been typing in. And I want to thank Eric for being a soldier for the U.S. Marines, and Michael and Airman. Thank you very much for your service.
all right, thanks for that. I'm gonna go first and let the other guys talk because I talked so much. I'm gonna make this very short for you. Does milled lumber need additional work before use? Yes and no. You can use it straight off the sawmill. Bandsaw mills in particular make some pretty nice finished product, really. But if you're going to do something like paneling with it, then yeah, you're going to have to plane it down once it's dried out. Sealants is a matter of personal opinion. My cabin, the entire interior of my cabin is knotty pine. It was planed. I made the tongue and groove. I didn't put any sealants on it at all, and years later, it's still beautiful. So it's all just depends on use.
For when people are calling me for custom cut lumber off my own place, that's one of the first questions I ask is how are they planning on sealing it or treating it, painting it, and a lot of times I'll suggest different types of lumber for that. White fir is the same material that we're using for molding. It takes paint and stain, sealants, everything without a whole lot of extra preparation, no sanding sealers, no things like that. Red fir tends to blotch, so you need to use a sanding sealer or some sort of oil to make it clean. And then pine is another one. If you're going to stain it, you're really going to want to use some sort of sealer before you use it. So choosing which lumber you have will help out with your final product.
David?
I just to kind of finish up here, I think that there's so much gratification in sawing, and that's every log to me is it's going from a round ugly log to a nice square can, and then putting it in cutting into the lumber it's just it makes it exciting. So I just I love, like I said, I love milling, and to encourage anybody that wants to stop by, and we'll do a couple logs together.
All right, well, thank you very much for your time, everyone. For the audience, I really appreciate you tuning in to the sawmill session. So hope you have a great rest of the day. There are 1,450 people that were pre-registered. So I think it's totally awesome that you're spending your Saturday learning about how to take care of your woods. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy. You
Thank
guys
you,
have a
everyone.
great day.